Alright, we're going. I guess you guys aren't seeing my screen though, so that's kind of a problem.
Wait, is it hooked up to Victor? Okay.
It is. Woo! Okay, here we go. So today we're going to talk about something kind of nifty. Today we're going to talk about something called sessions. Can anyone tell me what a session is in terms of web?
So something like we log in to something or we buy something, a transaction, it keeps the information without getting lost in each page.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's solid. So basically the idea is this. Normally in the course of making web requests, how does that whole cycle work? We have a browser, something that the user is using, that makes this request on behalf of the user, and then the server goes and returns something back, whether it be just some static HTML file, or maybe it's a static file of some other sort, maybe it's an image, whatever. However, what we've been working with is we've been working with Jinja templating, meaning that we can actually put some dynamic information into the pages that we send back to the browser. So what the session is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to persist some information across requests. So normally when we make one request and another request after that, the second request doesn't know anything about whatever came before it. And also, any future request won't know anything about that second request either. So it's kind of like each request is an individual event that has no connection to the future or the past. So with session, we're going to be able to change that and actually have some information carried over. So what would be a good use for session that you guys can think of? What might we want to persist from request to request?
Transactions.
Yeah, that could be something. Or it could be, if we're talking about an e-commerce type of situation, maybe we might want to persist whatever that person's shopping cart was, right? Good. What's another possible use for sessions?
What do you mean by persisting?
Persist just mean have that information available for subsequent requests.
Maybe when you're registering a new account, you've got to go through multiple pages.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good. So let's say we're done registering now, and we've successfully created our new account. What do we want to have available for each subsequent request at that point?
Account info.
Yeah, maybe some account info. It could be something as simple as maybe the user ID, because if we have the user ID, we can probably go back to our database and go get any information about that particular user that we need. So let's say we needed his first name or her first name. We can easily make a request to our database because we have the proper user ID at our disposal. Okay? It could be even other things that we might want to store in the session. For instance, like what if a person told me that his favorite color was yellow? And maybe I wanted my page background to look yellow because he likes that color. So if I store that in the session, I'll have that available to me on every subsequent request. Okay, any questions about the concept of session, what it's useful for? No? All right, so let's get into an actual concrete example of that. I'm going to open up a new window here. We had a project that we were kind of working with, our Hello Flask demo, and I think what we'll do is we'll just continue working with that. You don't like that one? Like, wait, I thought our Hello Flask demo was great. So fun. Alright, so let's open this up. Alright, so just a little refresher. In our Hello Flask demo, what we were doing is we just kind of had this little table of users that we were displaying, and then we also had a form that was taking in the information for a new user. Sorry, my VS Code seems to be stalling on me. Goodness. For some reason, every time I change the zoom level, it's so slow to respond. So let me just close that out. Okay, so again, we had a template here that had up above, we had a users table. We were just iterating through all the users that we were sending to our template. And then we had a form down here where we were taking in some kind of new user. So now what I want to be able to do is I want to submit a new user, and then in our, what's that? Oh yeah, it's probably a little too bright, that's true. And then what I want to do after I've submitted this new user is I want to save that new user into session, so that on my template I can just say the last submitted user is whatever, right? Okay, so how do we do that? Let's go back to our server.py. And what I'm going to do in my index route here is I'm basically going to ask myself, or ask the code rather, is there a last submitted user in session? Okay, and if there is, then I'm good to go, and I could just pass that last user to my template to actually display, right? What if there's not? What do you think I might do then? Anyone? Maybe I'll just set a default. I'll just say that, you know, there was, maybe I'll just set it to none, something like that. Okay, so let's do this. So in order to use session, what do I need to do? All you guys that have already gotten into sessions, what's required at this point?
Seems like a session variable. I don't quite
All right, that's okay. That's okay. So let's just pretend like we're, you know, I'm gonna make some mistakes kind of on purpose so that you guys see what would happen. All right. So here we're inside the index route. I'm gonna come up here, and then we'll just say if. So we'll say last. I'm gonna say last submitted user. And then we'll say not in session. And before we go any further, what does that mean, guys?
We're not in a current session.
It's not active.
It doesn't necessarily mean that there's not an active session right now. What it means is that this specific key is not in what. First of all, what kind of data structure is a session? Does anyone know? So session is just going to be a dictionary. Okay. So we're just saying if this specific key is not in the session dictionary, then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set something in there for it, and we'll just say it's none, or something like that, right? Because if there's no last submitted user, that means that maybe this is the first time that I visited the page, or maybe I haven't yet even submitted any users. Does that make sense to you guys? Kind of, sort of. All right, so let's add it. So we'll say if it's not in session, then we'll say session, and then this is how we reference a key, right? We would say last submitted user. Oops. Equals none. Okay, now that I've saved it, notice that I've got these red squigglies. What are they telling me? Louder? I think you're saying the right thing. I just couldn't hear it quite well.
We need to import session from class.
Yes, correct. So we either need to import it, or we need to write this, you know, create a session dictionary. Obviously, we don't want to create a session dictionary because Flask has that functionality built out, right? So let's just go use what's already there. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. And we will also import session here. Oops. Okay, now our red squigglies go away. Now what I'm going to do is that when I render this template, I'm going to pass along my last submitted user so that I can actually display it on the front end. Okay? So let's do that. So we'll say last submitted equals session at last submitted user. Okay? Now we're not yet running this project, so let me go back in. What do I need to do before I run the project?
Turn on Python.
Did you say environment? I didn't catch
Well,
that.
yeah. Well, I said turn on Python, but
Python is always on. No, I'm kidding. But what's the other thing that we always need to do when we're going to run our
set up
project?
your environment.
We need to get our environment activated, right? So let's go. I've got this Flask environment, so I'll say source up a couple levels into my environments, and then Flask bin activate. Okay, so now we're activated, and then when we want to run it, we just say Python and then the name of the file. Okay, so we're all good. Let's go check it out and make sure that it's still running. Port 3000. Oops. Aha! Now we've run into an error. What is our error telling us? So no secret key has been set. This is something that's going to be required by Flask in order to use session itself. So we need to set that up here towards the top of our file. After we've created our app, first of all, can I do it up in here? If I say app.secretKey, some very secret key, would this work? Notice how it actually crashed my server. Why is that? Why did it crash here? You see the red squiggly there? What's that telling us?
Because it's got to be.
Oh, we don't have an app, maybe? Not in the app.
It's got to be under the app equals.
Right. So Ryan makes a very good point here. Is that this is all being read top to bottom. So here at the point where I'm saying the secret key is connected to app, well, app hasn't yet been defined, right? Okay. So we just need to move that underneath where our app is created. Good. All right, so now we've got some very secret key. I need to run this again because my server crashed. All right, now let's try that again. So just go like that. So good, now we're rendering. Now what I want to do is just output this somewhere to the template. We'll output, this was the last submitted user. And I'll probably make it some kind of a conditional statement, because if we first get there, was there a last submitted user? Not yet, right? So guys, how do I make a conditional statement in here? It's been a long weekend, huh? How do I do a conditional here? Okay, mustache. Is it the double mustache? No. Single, right? So I could say if, I had it as last submitted, and then we'll say is not equal to none. Then let's just put that in I don't know, p tag here. So we'll say the last submitted user was, and then let's just, so how do I output it to the template? I already did it, but I'm going to take this away so you guys can think. How do I actually output that to the template itself, the last submitted user? Double mustache, I heard it. Very good. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is when we submit a user, I'm just going to set, I'm not going to create like different properties on that user. We're just going to say it's just the last submitted. So we'll put the name in there if we have someone. All right, what else do I need to do down here? Close it out, right? All right, I'll save that. We'll just refresh, make sure everything's good. All right, so we're not getting any errors, and we also didn't have anything output to our template. So that's working as expected, meaning that, excuse me, our last submitted user right now is none. All right, good. Now what's the next step? What do we need to do to actually get some last submitted users?
Start pending users.
Yeah. I need to get you guys some coffee or something. This is a slow Monday morning. All right, yeah, so what we need to do, we have this form right now that is accepting submissions, but we're not really doing anything with them. All we were doing on the form submission is we were just redirecting right back to this page. So now what I'm going to do is when that form is submitted, I'm going to save the first and last name to this last submitted user key of our session dictionary. Okay, so let's go back to server.py. And then in here, where we're dealing with the post request, which was right here on line 6, instead of just printing out request.form, let's actually set these things to the session. Okay, so we'll say session. Actually, before I do that, what I'm going to do is save my form to request.form. Does anyone have any idea why I want to do that? Yeah, it's just because I'm lazy. I don't want to reference it as request.form every single time. Yeah, request.form, first name, request.form, last name. I just want to say form. Okay. Yeah, it makes things kind of easy, especially if we're going to deal with a whole bunch of different keys and we don't want to keep writing that out or typing it out. So let's just say session and then last submitted user is going to equal form at first name. And then I'm going to concatenate a little space in there. And then form at last name. Okay. All right, and then again, the same logic still holds. We're still just going to redirect them back to the main index page. So let's submit here and test this out. Go here and submit myself. Okay, last submitted user was myself. I'm going to submit Anna too. At young.com. All right, so that's changing every time. So I can refresh this page and it's still going to show that you were the last submitted user because, again, this information is being persisted between requests. It's not something that's only available one time around. Okay, so every time I hit this page, it's still going to be Anna until I change that. And if you guys want to see what's helping us keep track of this, if we go into the application tab here, we can see there's this cookies part. And notice here, let me delete a couple of these guys. Delete selected, delete that guy. Okay, so these are the ones that Flask is using, I believe, either the session or the session ID. Let me dump this real quick and see what happens. Okay, so yeah, what we're using is this session cookie right here. What's going to happen if I clear that cookie?
That top line is going to go
the last.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the top line in the template?
Last minute user.
Okay, yeah, correct. For some reason I thought you meant the actual cookie would go away. And I was gonna say, yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah, it'll definitely go away. So if we clear this, and there we go. So that session that we had going now ended because I got rid of the cookie that was holding onto it. The other way that you can clear sessions is by force. So if I wanted to, let's say, I'll just create a new route which will essentially reset my session. Okay. So let's go app.route, and then we'll say reset. So when we hit this route, we're just going to clear the session, and then we'll redirect back to the index. Okay, so let's do session.clear, and then return redirect. Oops. There. Okay. So let's enter someone again. So I'm going to go Linda. Whoa. l@m.com. Okay, last submitted user was Linda Mendoza, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to land on this reset route, and we should be able to reset our session. Oops. Okay, so we got rid of what we had, and then if I were to refresh this, so our cookie is still there, because what happened is when I came back to the index route, remember we had some logic in there? So when we hit the index route, if we don't have a last submitted user yet in our session, we're just going to put one in there as none. So every time we hit the page, we're going to start a new session if there's not one currently. Okay? And depending on what language or framework you're using, a session can have some kind of variable length of time. I believe in Flask it's a browser-based session, which would mean that this session would last as long as I didn't just close my browser completely. But in a lot of cases, it would actually be some length of time, so it might be like 30 minutes for the length of the session. Okay. Any questions about this? Does it all make sense? Let's have some thumbs on this. Okay, I'm going to come back to you. Jorge? George? Sideways? Sideways?
I'm inside.
Kevin, where are you at?
I'm like 3/4 of a tank.
Kevin's like full-blown sideways. All right, guys, give me your clarifications. There are obviously questions. Let's have them. Now, don't get me wrong. You can ask us later, too, but if there's something that you think other people are potentially confused about as well, let's air them out. You, Linda, what's your question? I'm looking at you, and I know there's some.
I don't even know where to start.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I have to go through the Flask because I haven't even started.
Haven't started
So-
Flask. Okay. Does the concept of a session, though, make sense to you?
Yeah, the concept does make sense.
Concept makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think conceptually it all makes sense to me too. It's just again the whole even with Python in general, even though we've been on it a week, it's like I'm still not comfortable with. You know, I was explaining it the other day. Like I feel like I'm like, you know, like I'm swimming in it, but like I'm not really like I'm not out there breaststroking and doing laps or anything. Just kind of like holding my head above water.
We're just
Right.
Yeah.
just treading
Right.
water.
Yeah.
If you swim backwards, it's easier.
It's not like that comfortable tread. You know, it's kind of like the little kid tread. You know, like
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I understand. I totally understand. And one thing that I've been trying to stress with you guys, because I know that sometimes it feels like you're behind, or you're not understanding things. Just recognize that you probably understand it a little bit better than you even think you do.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely like a lot of times like I'll finish something and it'll work and I'll be like, oh wow, I can't believe that works. Like I'm not really sure why it works, but
Yeah, I think overthinking is kind of a big problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, but again, I mean, the big takeaways here are just that a session is something that we can store some information in. so that we'll have access to it on every page visit. Okay. One thing that I should say about this is that you don't really want to store anything sensitive inside your session. The reason why is because the information in there could be accessed potentially by a hacker. And in fact, there's a video, I'll try to dig it up for you guys, of a guy who shows you in a very short amount of time how to just grab all the information from a session, from a flash session. Okay, so we don't want to store things like passwords in there. A user ID, however, is probably okay to store because it's only going to be your back end that's going to be doing anything with that, right? Hopefully you've got some other security in place so that a person can't just take that user ID and then go do something with it in your server. Now, security is a very complicated thing, but basically you want to sort of the idea is to reduce the surface area that an attacker can get to. All right. So just don't store anything sensitive in here. You could store like a first name and a last name if you wanted. If I wanted my next page or all my pages to be able to show my first and last names, I could put that in my session too if I wanted.
So where would you store that sensitive information if it's not in a session?
Like a password? Is that what you mean? Well, we only want to have, first of all, we don't want to store a plain text password. So, and the reason why is because if somebody gets into your database, well, now they have all the passwords,
So you want
right?
it to be encrypted.
Yeah, so we want to actually hash our passwords before we put them in the database. But the other thing is that the session doesn't even need to know the password. And the reason why is because it's only relevant when we're either creating a new user or when we're logging in. After that point, it doesn't matter, right? So it's not something that we have to have access to page after page, right? You wouldn't want to store credit card details either. So again, those would really only be relevant when that transaction is happening. After that, security around credit card numbers tends to be a little bit heavier for obvious reasons because those things get swiped so frequently.
Yeah, why is it that? How is I know that it's like really easy to like hack bank accounts and stuff. Like, how is it so easy to do that?
I couldn't tell you. I've never hacked a bank account. I've never tried it. Do we have any people here who have hacked a bank account?
Yeah.
You have?
I haven't, but I would see bank accounts like hacked all the time,
Mm.
regularly.
Okay.
And so I was just kind of like wondering, like how like with all the security in place, how is it that like
Well, probably
how can
one.
you hack so like easily?
Anything.
My guess is that one of the most effective things is a phishing type of attack. So if you send somebody a fake email that looks pretty legit, and then they click on that link, right, and they go right to your page,
Yeah.
it's very easy for you to swipe their password because they're entering in their password. They think they're logging into their regular bank account,
Oh,
but they've just given you their information. Yeah.
I don't want to get too far off topic, but I did read a book before I started this class. This is a month before when I was just kind of getting interested in this stuff. And it was a guy who this completely got off topic, but it was a guy who done he was a pinhole tester for the Pentagon, and he wrote a book about all this stuff. And he said that in their weekly pinhole tests,
Mm-hmm.
that it's considered a failure if they don't hack into the Pentagon in under an hour. And he said like in his entire career, their group of pinhole testers had never not hacked it in under an hour. And that's the Pentagon.
That's
So
crazy.
it's pretty impressive that
Right.
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
Some
Okay.
high level people, I guess.
Right. Yeah, so obviously we're not going to teach you guys any of those high-level hacking techniques, but just something to keep in mind is that we don't want to keep sensitive stuff in our session, that's all. All right. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to wrap it up and let you guys get back to your regular programming.
What's our? Is it? I'm sure.
Oh, your end-of-day goal. I guess I should give you that, right? It is here on the sheet. Let's see what it is. Read up to session. Okay, so your end of day goal is this thing called Ninja Gold. You guys will learn to know and love Ninja Gold. You're going to see it in Flask, in Django, and then you'll also see it in Mean and Java as well. Yeah, so by the by the time you hit it for the second or third time, you'll probably pretty much know what you have to do without even looking at the picture. Like, oh yeah, I know how this game works. Okay. It'll become an old friend.
Let's get around this.
Cool. Let's wrap it up, guys.